Yes, my friend, part two, talking about speaking in tongues or speaking in other tongues. And I left off on part one talking about you just cannot speak in tongues in a heavenly language whenever you get ready to. You just cannot do that. No, because it is another foreign language that you didn't go to school to learn. So how you gonna speak a foreign language whenever you get ready to? You can't do it unless you go to school to do that. Speaking in other tongues by those that have the gift of tongues. See, you got to have the gift to speak in other tongues. They will not have to go to school to learn how to speak in tongues. No, they don't. Because it is a heavenly tongue that comes from God, my Lord. God gave all nations their tongues, and he can baptize whomsoever he will with other tongues. Most of the time, the person that has the gift of speaking in tongues, whenever God pours out his spirit, they do not understand what they are saying themselves. This is why when God used the gift of tongues, he will not do so unless there is one there that has the gift of interpretation. God does not, God does things in decency and in order. And it is out of order when someone is rattling off at the mouth and there is no interpreter. You follow me? No interpreter. Made up tongues cannot be interpreted, but that person only edified themselves, and they do not edify the church with false tongues. No. You only edify yourself when you play with tongues in church. The first time that man spake in other tongues was when they were trying to build a Sears tower or the Tower of Babel to reach up into the heavens like Trump towers. God always intended for man to dwell down on earth from whence he came, because a high tower means a high mind, which God hates. A high mind, a high look, you know. So while these men were attempting to build the Tower of Babel, God confounded their languages, and they began their language, and they began to speak in other tongues to each other. At the first, they were with one speech, one language, but now they couldn't understand each other anymore. One guy may say, "Hey, pass me the brick, pass me some mud." He could understand his coworker no longer. This is how we all that's in the world right now, while we speak in different languages abroad. That they was in one place being misunderstood, so God scattered them throughout the earth with their tongues. So this is why you have the Australian with their tongue way down under. This is why you have the Alaskan way up yonder. Then you have the American in California way out yonder. So this is why we have many different languages on earth, because man was trying to build a Sears tower before his time. And as we see today at the many tall buildings that are going up, man never gave up. So God confounded, God caused confusion in their languages. If you are on the sky deck, now listen to this. If you're on the sky deck on the 103rd floor of the Sears Tower in Chicago, and there's a fire that's covering the 102nd floor all over, and you trapped. You see what I'm saying? Then you can see why that God wanted man to dwell on earth. God wanted man to be on earth so when in time of trouble, there could always be made a way that God could make a way for his escape. Are you following me? So this is why once again we have all these different languages all over the earth because man was trying to build the Tower of Babel. So uh, like I like I stated before, to build a tower to reach heaven, and in times of trouble, God want man to be on earth. God want man to be in the plains, if you know what I mean. Yes. God didn't want his people to be trapped. What if God himself had built a tower that man could got trapped in? Then man, if he had got trapped, he would have started cursing God and denouncing God and blaspheming God. You know, then man would doubted God even more so. Now let's get back to speaking in tongues, these tongue talkers. The second time that people spake out of their languages into another language was the day of Pentecost. Men and women was in the upper room on the day of Pentecost. Then the sound of a mighty rushing wind came and filled the room, and they that were in the room began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit, not when they got ready. They didn't speak in tongues when they got ready because they could have did that before the sound of the rushing wind came in. But in the church, if you want to speak in tongues, wait on the sound of the rushing wind to come in. And that is, you must have the gift to speak in tongues. You can't speak in tongues whenever you get ready to. So, when the sound of the rushing wind came in and they began to speak in tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. Once again, God will not send tongues, heavenly tongues, unless there is a interpreter. The interpreter were men of all nations. In this case, on the day of Pentecost, men that interpret what the people were saying in the upper room, they was men of all nations standing round about outside. And they heard the men and women in the upper room speak in their tongues. This was a wonder. The men could not understand how they were speaking in their tongues. And being of a different nationality, they didn't understand how they were speaking their language. And there was men of all nations standing about. So the men thought maybe they were drunk. And Peter rose up and said, yes, they are drunk, but not as ye suppose. These people in the upper room are excessive with the spirit and not excessive with strong drink. Paul said he'd rather speak 5 words with my understanding than 10,000 words in an unknown tongue. Tongues are not to be played with because one is may come in unlearned, unbeliever come in your church and everybody's speaking in tongues and he walking in that assembly, unbeliever walking in an assembly where everybody's speaking in tongues. You know what the first thing they will say? That these people are mad. These people are barbarians.